Okay, I'm going to talk about the role of diversity in the game industry today and what's happening and what's going on today. Come on. I'm Sheri Graner. I'm currently the head of game development and production for a little startup in Austin called Big Noise Games. I'm also the head of my own company called Zombie Cat Studios in Austin. I actually started in 1989 at Origin Systems. I started as a writer and a designer. Actually, I really started as a writer because back then there was no title designer. It was just a writer or an artist or a programmer. I'm the author of Gender Inclusive Game Design, Expanding the Market. Thank you. I'm the founder of Women in Games International, one of the founding members of Women in Games International. I'm one of the two founders of the IGDA's Women in Game Development SIG. I'm a hardcore gamer. I am playing on the computer most of my free time. Either I like to play MMOs specifically, but action, adventure, and RPGs are kind of what I really like to play. And when I'm not playing computer games, I'm a paper gamer. I have a Dungeons & Dragons group that's been running for 20 years. Same guys, same campaign. Well, not always the same campaign. We've been playing different systems in the last 10 years. So don't call me on Monday night, because that's when I'm running my game. So I'm talking about diversity in the game industry. One of the very interesting things, what? Hey, look, Oracle wants to update. No, go away. One of the interesting things about diversity and about the movement of diversity in our industry is that you can really trace it back to the 1960s and the civil rights movement. Because we, of course, we had the big epic change. We had the whole civil rights movement come in. We had, governmental decrees. Well, one of the things that came along with that was the EOE. And when the EOE was put into place, the Fortune 500 companies went about putting in diversity programs within their companies. Now, the nice thing about that is we have 30 years of numbers that we can go back and look at to see what diversity has actually done for business. What can we actually point at? So let's look at some of this stuff. Diversity in business today. Here's some of the things that the diversity in workforces results in. Some of the things we know, we actually see an actual marketable, countable increase in return on equity. We see an increase in shareholders' return. We know that companies with the highest percentage of women in decision-making roles they had the highest earnings, they made the better business decisions. And just across the board, companies with diverse boards make better business decisions overall. So we know this from the diversity programs that have been put in place. Here's the most important thing. Every single one of the Fortune 500 companies that they spoke to when Forbes magazine did their report, every single one of them said that they saw an increase in creativity and innovation with the increase in their diversity in their workforce. That's pretty important for a creative industry like ourselves. So, we know that diversity improves the bottom line. We know it makes our shareholders happy. That's always good. We know it improves our decision making. We know it opens some avenues to some new markets. And we know it's critical to innovation and creativity. So, what we know, diversity is good for business. Hooray! And we can actually point to the numbers and show it actually is good for business. So, I went out and kind of did a straw poll. I started talking to people, and I asked a bunch of my friends and a bunch of the CEOs that I know in the game industry, and I said, so, when I say diversity, what does that mean to you? And what do you think the first thing they thought of was? Profits? Creativity? Innovation? No, this is the first thing they said. So to them, diversity meant lawsuits. Okay, so I thought, okay, I'm going to talk to some more people. So I went out to production teams, and I went out to production leads and creative directors and executive producers, that level of the teams. And I said, when I say diversity to you, what does it mean? Their answer to me was a lack of quality. They said, if we have to hire for diversity, we definitely are going to lose quality. Then I went out to people just working in the industry or thinking about in the industry, and I said, when I say diversity to you, what does it mean? That was the scariest one to me. This is a fairly new turn in the definition of diversity in our industry today, is that we actually are seeing women and other minorities turn their back on the game industry because they feel like if they do, they're going to put a big target on themselves and be targets for harassment. And that's pretty sad. So, on one hand, we know these great things about diversity. We know that diversity increases creativity, increases business, all the way down to the bottom line. Diversity is a great thing for business. Yet when we talk to the industry, this is what we think of. We've got a real serious disconnect here, people. Something's really wrong. If this is something that's obviously so good, is something that's treated so badly when we talk about it within our industry. Let's talk about some of these things. Let's talk about this concept of lawsuits. This one it's kind of funny when you first think about it, but really truthfully, it's the first fear and the first thing that's said to me when I talk about diversity, when I'm talking to C-level people within the industry. And they say, well, man, all I can think about is, I don't even want to get involved in it because it means I'm going to get sued. Let me tell you something. Lawsuits don't just fall out of the sky on your head. They don't just happen, oh my goodness, it's not like the 16-ton weight out of Monty Python drops right on your head just uncalled for when you get a lawsuit. That's not the way it is. There's lots of precedent. There's lots of laws. It's black and white. We understand and we know very well from a legal sense what is discrimination and what is harassment. So what this means is we need to start educating ourselves on exactly what it is. And I'm talking about the C-level people. We need to start understanding. Anti-discrimination law, anti-harassment law, it's not nebulous. It's not something that may actually hit you accidentally. It's something you can actually go out and learn about. And there's so many people who don't. So if you were going to take up skydiving, wouldn't you want to understand and learn how it works and learn the rules before you did it? I mean, I'm sure you could probably go, charter a plane, find the parachute someplace, and you might even figure out how to get the parachute on. But when you jumped out of that plane, it's very likely it's going to be very catastrophic if you don't have somebody actually teach you and if you don't actually understand what the rules are and how skydiving actually works. It's the same thing when dealing with discrimination and harassment law. If you understand it and learn it up front, you have a far greater chance of success than if you do if you just simply try to figure out how to strap that parachute on and jump out of the airplane. So it's really all comes down to educating yourself. Now, if you Google, harassment, seminars, things like that, the list just goes on and on and on forever. There's seminars, there's workshops. But I don't know about you, but I've been to some of those, and they're really kind of written at almost an elementary school level, and they're very dry, and it's not very interesting. But you know what? There are an awful lot of people in the law profession. There are lawyers out there whose job it is to prosecute harassment and what they call employment law. It's a whole side of law called employment law. And a lot of those lawyers are happy to come and teach you and do a private or a small seminar one-on-one with you to teach you how to keep from being sued by them. This seems to me to be worth it. If I were going to go jump out of that plane, if I were going to start a business, or in my case, I have started a business, one of the things I've made very sure that I'm very educated on is discrimination and harassment law, because it's just going to avoid the accidents as we move further on down the path. The other thing we have to make sure about is it's not just educating yourself, it's also about educating your employees. So, if you were teaching your kid to drive, would you just say, the kid's been riding around in a car since he was born, I'm sure he understands the rules, no problem. Besides, just taking those classes, that's just checking the boxes. I don't have to worry about that, it's just checking the boxes. Sending a kid out to learn to drive or to drive in a car with no kind of education is tantamount to sending them out to be killed or to have a crash or have some kind of bad wreck. Not teaching your employees about harassment and discrimination is very much the same thing. Once again, you can Google and find all kinds of classes and programs and kinds of things that you can do to get your employee base educated. But so many of us will tend to push that off to our HR department. Would you rely on your accountants to teach your kid to drive? I don't think so. Now, maybe if your accountant was also a driving instructor or something, you might, but I'm sure you probably would still want to oversee it and make sure that the kid was actually being taught the right things. This is the same kind of situation. You need to make sure that the kids are educated. Make sure your employees understand what it is and understand that it's serious. And if they break these rules, bad things can happen to them. Which comes down to this point. When we're talking about this kind of education, it has to be taken seriously. I cannot tell you how many companies I've worked with who come through and go, oh yeah, you got to do that harassment thing. Just do it online. It's just a box we have to check. Don't worry about it. It's quick. It won't take any of your time. Just get through it really quick. That's all I ask. That's not what I want to hear my skydiving instructor say to me. Just check the boxes. It's all right. Don't worry about it. We can't do that. We have to take it seriously because, quite frankly, if we don't take it seriously, our employees are not going to take it seriously. If we brush it off as just some box that we have to check, we're setting ourselves up for disaster. We have to understand these. We have to be there. We have to take it seriously. Your employees have to take it seriously. They have to see you taking the classes, sit in the classes with them, ask questions at the same time they're asking questions. Let them know you take this seriously because this is the life and health of your company we're talking about. This is a way you protect yourself. Does this mean some crazy bra-burning maniacs are going to come marching and break down your door? No. Of course it doesn't. This is just a way of staying safe and making sure you don't get into those kind of situations that you might have to deal with if you don't have the education. It's education, and it's just key to what we need to understand what discrimination and harassment is. Let's talk about this quality problem. I cannot tell you how many times, and I'm sure some of you maybe have even had somebody tell you, or maybe even you yourself had said, we hired a woman once. It was awful. She was terrible. Y'all seen this cartoon? So, just because one person, one representative, does that mean all the minorities are bad? Does it truly mean that there's no minorities out there that have any kind of quality? Is that even possibly true? Well, obviously, the answer is no. So what we need to do is we have to find the quality candidates. We have to get out there and we have to find the quality candidates. We have to broaden our candidate pool. I think if you listened to some of our keynotes earlier, we were talking about finding the broadest group of people. Finding the best candidates means looking for the broadest possible pool that we can. Unfortunately, a lot of us put our ads on Gamma Sutra or take a booth at GDC and then go, we didn't get any resumes in from any minorities. Well, have you looked at the readership of Gamma Sutra or the attendance at GDC? Well, guess what? If that's where you're putting your job postings, that's where you're going to get them. So it's just imperative that we start reaching out and looking for other areas where we might find a more diverse candidate base. And why am I talking about this when I'm talking about our producers and our executive producers? Because right now, basically what we've got is we've got HR departments and C-level people that it's just hire somebody, just do it, that's your job. But if we can help them, and if we can show them places where they can go and recruit and find more people, that helps them do their job. And in the end, it helps us make better products, which in the end helps us keep our jobs. I don't know about y'all, but I really like working in this industry. And if I can do something that helps my company make better products and make more money so I can keep getting my paycheck, I'm happy to do it. So reach out, start looking around, start finding places where we can go, where we can recruit. We can find diverse people, someplace beyond Gamma Sutra and GDC. Yeah, those are great, but there's other places, and we need to make sure we have the broadest pool. Now, I gave a similar talk on finding diversity and keeping diversity at the Leadership Summit a couple of years ago. And I actually had a CEO sitting here in the front row, and he piped up about this time, and he said, if people aren't passionate enough to find me, then they're not passionate enough to make my games. And I don't want them. And I don't want to spend the money to find them. Why would you shut your door on a 35% increase on return on equity? That's kind of silly. because all you need to do is think about changing your ways and looking someplace and building a bigger pool. But he was adamant. And that's really sad that we do still have some of that today. Again, this is why I'm looking for the manager level people to step up and say, here's a great place where we can go and recruit. Here's a great place where we can look for some candidates. So how many of you have ever been in the middle of working on something and had your HR person or your producer or something walk in and go, man, we've got an interview coming through, and you're like, we have interviews today? Yeah, look, I'm just bringing them in, just find out if you like them. Find out if they're a cultural fit. Man, these are some of the worst words you can ever say or you ever want to hear. Cultural fit. This is the definition of cultural fit as per most HR educational materials. A cultural fit is the likelihood that a job candidate will be able to conform and adapt to the core values and collective behavior that make up an organization. Where up there does it say, find somebody just like you? But that's when you're telling your team, or when your team is told, find out if you like them, find out if they're a cultural fit. That's basically what they think. Find somebody just like you. Well, you know what? When I walk in for an interview, I don't look like any of them. I look like a soccer bomb. I don't talk like them. I don't smell like them. Maybe we would probably like the same movies and books, but otherwise, no. And so I'm very likely to be deemed not a cultural fit because the vast majority of the teams don't know what those words mean. They mean this: can this candidate conform to the behavior of this organization? Now, if your organizations, some of your behaviors include going to strip clubs to hold your meetings, then we have a different problem. We need to talk about that. Because if you have behaviors and beliefs within your organization that preclude other minorities from entering, then we have another problem, and we need to talk about that, and that's another talk. But for the most part, can this person fit? Can they conform to what we need? And otherwise, do they have a skill set that is complementary to what we need? Do they fill a need that we have on this team? Do they relieve a pressure point somewhere for us? And that's a whole lot more than just, do you like them? So if you're a person on a team and you get this in, ask some questions. Find out what the person is being brought in for. Find out what skills they're being interviewed for. If you're a producer on a team, prepare your team. Give them some questions to work with. Because if all we're saying is find out if you like them, we're going to end up with homogeneous teams. And we're going to lose out on the benefits that diversity brings to us. Which brings us to the whole, what is the job posting? How many times have you seen job postings that say, I need 5 years or 10 years experience and 5 ship titles? All of them, right. That's really great, except if you're trying to find a diverse candidate base. Because let me tell you something, you think the number of minorities that are in the industry now is bad? Look at 10 years ago. And now you want somebody from 10 years ago who also shipped 5 titles? Your numbers are even smaller. You're talking about finding somebody that's a minority that fills those requirements is going to be just vanishingly small. So one of the things we need to do is we need to figure out what else can fill that hole. And you'd be surprised. We need to be able to start looking at skill sets rather than actual hard qualifications. Frankly, I have found some of my absolute best world builders come out of architectural school. They understand how people move in a 3D space. They make great levels, make fabulous level designers. And the number of people that we have today, if you saw the talk earlier today and saw the percentages and number of people that are actually playing games today, if they've got experience playing games and have come out of an architectural school, you bet I want to talk to them about a level design position, world building position. Graphic arts, man, I pulled a lot of artists out of the graphic arts program that never had any idea that they thought they'd be going into games. And one of the best tech directors at a AAA studio making a AAA MMO based on a major movie license, their tech director Came out of the energy industry where he was a tools builder. He ended up being the tech director for Sony Online Entertainment. Did he have any ship titles before he started there? No. He was a game player and a tool builder. And one of the best hires that we made at that company. So we need to look at expanding our job description. And I hate to say it, but it's kind of a little bit lazy to say, 10 years experience and 5 ship titles. That's lazy. Let's look at the position and identify what skill sets are needed in this position. What do we need? Where are the holes in our team that we need to fill, and what skill sets fill that as compared to just simply have they got a ship title? Because you know what? They may have a ship title, but if they were in QA, that doesn't necessarily mean they would fill a great programming slot. Just because they got a name on a ship title doesn't mean they have the skill set that you need for that team. So let's start looking at and identifying the skill sets that are needed. Again, as I said, consider other experience. This is probably the hardest one. Again, this is a new problem that we're dealing with. I've been talking about diversity. My first time I spoke about diversity in games was 1992 at SIGGRAPH. So this is kind of a big deal for me. I'm real strong on making sure that we have diverse people working for us, that we make titles that reach diverse audiences. This problem is a new problem. And I've thought about it an awful lot and how we deal with it. And all of us in here need to think about this, and we all need to think about how to deal with it. And we all want to be very reactionary and just scream and yell and holler and tear our hair when we start hearing about some of the horrible things that are happening. But I'm all about finding the productive steps that we can do. What can we do positively, proactively, rather than just responding to the hate and the ugliness that we're seeing out there? And the big thing we need to do is we need to make diversity the norm. So a couple of years back, I was asked to give a keynote speech at Lifetime Television's annual marketing meeting in New York City. How many of y'all are familiar with Lifetime? Right? Okay, Lifetime started off as Lifetime Television for women. It's now just Lifetime, which I approve and appreciate. So how many of you remember a channel in a station that was the WB? Remember Buffy? Buffy the Vampire Slayer was the big one on the WB. Okay, WB's gone. It was a Lifetime channel. It was a Lifetime set of programming, and it's gone. And this was a big deal when I spoke at Lifetime. And I got to go listen to their marketing director talk, and he talked a lot about losing the WB and what happened. And so what happened is they were dropping their market share, and they didn't actually understand why they were dropping their market share. So they went out and they interviewed. And they went out to African American young adults, 18 to 35, because that was their market. And they asked them, why aren't you watching the WB? And their answer was, it's too white. So then they went out to the white audience, ages 18 to 35, and they asked them, why aren't you watching the WB? What do you think their answer was? Their answer was, it's too white. They were seeing diversity in their day-to-day life, in their schools, in their works, in their neighborhoods and communities, and that was not being reflected in what they were seeing in the shows. We need to make it where it's something, we need to be exactly the same place. We need to make it to where it's the norm to have a diverse workforce. We're walking into an all young, white, cis, able-bodied male office. Makes you go, well, that looks odd, because that's not the norm. So the question is then, how do you do that? Oops, that's too soon. Well, one of the things we need to do is we need to know where our resources are. There's a lot of resources. We have a lot of diversity groups now in the IGDA. We have the Women in Games group that like I said, I've been very instrumental in working with for many years. We have the Blacks in Gamers, we have able-bodied, we have the groups. I'm so proud and pleased to see this many groups. We need to know where they are, and we need to reach out to them and use them to help us find candidates and for where we can direct our friends to their groups where they can find support within the industry. We need to go to schools. The really fun thing is the schools that are teaching game programs now, because a lot of them are public schools, they have their EOE stuff and they need to work, and they work very hard to try to produce diverse classrooms and diverse students. I gave a talk to a classroom, and I realized, I was grinning, and about halfway through it I realized that in a class of 35 students there were only 2 Caucasians. And I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I like this. I want to see this diversity. So schools are a great place to go out and start talking, to start bringing in your diverse candidates. Scouting programs, we now have badges and patch programs in the scouting program. And then we have Crash Override. Now, Crash Override is a big resource now for those who are being harassed or in the middle of being harassed or having problems with some of the hate talk and the hate groups that are out there attacking the diverse members of our industry. And if you have a friend or if you are personally in this situation, you need to know where this is and you need to know where you can recommend them to go to. The other thing we need to do is we need to emphasize the positive. Now, I get a lot of pushback from this because a lot of people say that this is not necessarily what we need to do, but one of the things we do is I ask all of my friends, don't tell and don't ask to hear horror stories. That's not positive. We've all got horror stories. I got stories that'll curl your hair if I could tell you some of the things that have been said and done to me in this industry. But anytime anybody asks me for them, I've had reporters constantly ask me for these stories. I refuse to tell them. I'd rather talk about the positive, productive steps we've taken so we don't ever have to have these stories anymore. Instead of focusing on this negative, let's focus on the positive. Let me tell you about the people and the minorities that are out there that are making progress, that are making money. I need you to understand that there are qualified people in this industry that are minorities that are making really great games. And not necessarily games for minorities. I'm not talking about making a game for a minority. I'm talking about mainstream titles and AAA titles and big money. Let me talk to you about that, because that's the message that we need out there. You don't need to hear another horror story. So what is diversity really? Is it lawsuits? Is it angry women screaming about stuff? Is it unqualified people trying to make games, losing profits? No, that's not what diversity is at all. Diversity is something that we all must do something about. Ernest Adams wrote a really great essay a while back called Call to Arms for Decent Men. And in it he says, it's not up to women to talk, because if these people don't respect women, then they're not going to respect anything they say. So women talking about diversity or minorities talking about diversity are not the only answer. We all have to do something about it. But what diversity is primarily, diversity is a business imperative, creative businesses, and that's us. And that's it. I thank you all for coming to hear me.